New York City. Once in your life, you find her, someone who turns your heart around, and next thing you know, you're closing down the town. Best that you can do is fall in love. Someone who turns your heart around, and next thing you know, you're closing down the town. Wake up and it's still with you, even though you left your way across town. Wondering to yourself, hey, what?
Hi, I'm Jill Martin, and this is Worth the Price of Admission. Before I bring my guest on this evening, I would like to share some of my photographic work from my 10 years with Live Nation Entertainment. As I always say, photography changes everything, and especially in what we remember. And what I remember about this group of photos is that I would do it all again. The first photo is of Alice Cooper. Um, Wild gestures, the makeup, the ability to change soft to hard was truly amazing and a lot of fun to photograph. And then we have John Mayer. It was like going to a Beatles concert in the 60s. The girls were nuts, screaming, crying, trying to get on stage, pulling off their clothes. It was quite something to watch. Thank God for my steady hand. The third photo is Aerosmith. What can you say about this duo? Steven Tyler, Joe Perry, an amazing group of men. Not sure if there's anybody better. I was 400 feet from the stage at the soundboard and I had great equipment, and they played right into it. My guest this evening is Brooklyn's own Bill Pepitone. Bill is a retired member of the New York City Police Department with over 30 years of service. Bill ran for mayor in the last mayoral race in New York City, as well as being a New York Yankees superstar of Joe Pepitone's nephew. Joe just passed away last week, and we have a lot to talk about. Welcome, my friend.
Hi, Jill. How are you?
I'm good. Boy, you've pretty much seen it all over the world with the Trade Center and FBI's arrest of Sheikh Omar Rahman in Brooklyn. What was it like being in the situations that could turn deadly at any moment?
Yes, during my NYPD career, I had a front row seat to a lot of events like that, large scale events. Of course, 9/11 and the tragedy that occurred, the ensuing arrest of the Sheikh. I was actually there. Being a New York City police officer is unlike any other job in any profession. It can go from being boring to being terrifying in a second. So I enjoyed every minute of it. Like anything else, but I wouldn't have traded career in the NYPD for anything. I loved it.
And what was your most rewarding takeaway from being a police officer?
I reflect on people's lives, helping people on a daily basis. You see now, uh, police officers are put in such a bad light, but they do things on an everyday basis where they turn people's lives around, and being able to do that on a daily basis is a satisfying thing for me. Coming from a law enforcement we're now 3 generations of law enforcement in my family. It's about service. It's about helping people, and that's what you take out of it, and that's what you enjoy.
And you sure did come from a long line of civil servants, policemen, firefighters, detectives, including war veterans. And what made you go into law enforcement? Was it because of your family?
Absolutely, it was up to my dad. I remember going to his police academy graduation, wearing his hat and holding his billy club when I was about, uh, let's see, I was at the time 6 years old, and I knew right to be. I was going to be a New York City police officer, no matter what happened, no matter how well or how poorly I did in school. I was going to be a New York City police officer, and it was determination. It was my goal, and I achieved my dad.
And so after about 14 years, what I read, when you were on the force, you started training recruits to become New York's finest. What was that like?
That was one of my career. I had spent 14 years on the street, most in Brooklyn, and I decided I needed a change. 14 years on the street in Brooklyn will do that to you. So I wanted to teach ways you can go in the New York City Police Department. I wanted to the academy as a training instructor, physical fitness, self-defense training instructor, and being able to teach about 2,500 police recruits a year with them to teach them tactics and things that can save their lives in the street. And the best part of it was years later when I would run into my former recruits who were now police officers on the street, they'd come up to me and say, Instructor Pettis, and I actually had to use it in a real life scenario. And that's happened more than once. And I can't even describe the feeling you get when somebody comes up and tells you something like that. I really enjoyed my time at the police academy.
And what happens when someone's not making it? Like, how do you tell someone in the academy that maybe you should try something else? Did you run into that?
It's not easy. And yeah, absolutely. Ran into it all the time. For everyone. And that's not to put anybody down. It's not for everyone. And there are people that struggled physically. There were people who struggled academically. There are people who just didn't have the makeup to be a police officer, and it's difficult to be a police officer, especially in New York City. And there were many times where you had to sit down with them and say, "Hey, listen, this isn't working out. This might not be for you. If you're doing it for the wrong reasons, maybe you're trying to make someone happy by doing this, or trying to prove something to yourself. Reasons. So maybe you should look into another career." And again, you're not belittling someone, you're giving them advice that may save their life. So it does happen. It's difficult, but you have to do it.
And what is the percentage, Bill, of people that go through the academy that make it?
Back when I was an instructor, and we're going back, I retired in 2009, which is already. The percentage, if I had to guess, around 75%. That would be a guess. Today it's a little more, and there's a lot of controversy in New York City about them lowering the standards, uh, a recruitment problem, getting people to take police officer exam and becoming New York City police officers. So they've lowered the standards. They're looking to lower the standards even more. And again, there's a lot of controversy over that in New York. So I'm sure the graduate rate is probably higher, but that doesn't necessarily.
Did you ever experience any discrimination in the police force over the color of somebody's skin?
Something you see, yeah, absolutely. Um, Both ways, it really does. I mean, let's face it, there are some bad apples in the police department who discriminate, just like there are bad apples in every line of work. And there's a lot of discrimination towards police officers, their skin, for the color of the uniform they wear. But it does exist in our society. I did witness it. I don't approve of it. I certainly didn't approve of it then. I don't approve of it now. But it's an unfortunate part of life that we all have to get past and try and fix it. It's not fix. Just slogans on a shirt or on a poster aren't going to fix it. It's going to take great minds and people with open minds to try and stop that. It's not easy.
And so after you did that, you left New York and you went to Pennsylvania. You got involved with politics after becoming aware of a mismanagement and an attempted outsourcing of the local police department. Can you elaborate on that?
When I retired, we moved out to Pennsylvania, um, and I was home enjoying being a retired stay-at-home Mr. Mom. And I came across a newspaper and saw that the issues that our borough are in regards to their police department. The police department was being mismanaged. They had brought in an outside agency to run the police department, and they were going to outsource it to the state, which would have been to my town. So I decided, especially in law enforcement, that I would get involved politically, and I ran for mayor of our town. I finished a close second, even though I only had about 6 weeks to campaign. Years later, I ran for a council seat and I won. So it was quite an experience. I learned a lot, and it was great representing people. It's something that I learned is very similar to police work. You're serving people, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, you were involved with the community and emergency services. Good deal. Then you returned home to New York City in 2019. What was it like when you returned back to the city?
It was a very different city. I was gone for about 2009, about 10 years, a little more than 10 years, and it was a very different city. It wasn't the New York City of Rudy Giuliani, and it was different leadership, different path. Certainly, crime was starting to rise again. Anger towards the police, anger towards authority was starting to creep up again, the way it was in the streets weren't as clean. The city was trending backwards, going back towards the bad old days, and it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. I was glad to be home. I was glad to be around family again, but I didn't like what I was seeing.
And you and I met in November of 2018 at my late husband Billy's induction to the New York State Baseball Hall of Fame. And my family and I would like to thank you very much for coming that evening. It meant a lot.
Of course, it was an honor.
And it was an honor to meet you too and sit down and get to know you. And I'm so glad that we're doing this today. I hope we do many more. You've authored several books. I've read a couple of them. Good read, by the way. And I noticed that you've done a dozen books.
Close to it. Yeah, close to it.
Very good, huh? When do you have time to do that, Bill?
Some takes me a little longer than most authors, probably, because I do an hour here, 20 minutes there. Whenever I find some free time, I like to sit down and write. Something I enjoy, but time is.
And so shortly after us meeting, you decide that you're going to run for mayor. What was that journey like?
That was interesting. Again, I didn't like what I was seeing in the city. And then we had the in 2020. And I was sitting on the couch next to my girlfriend, Kathy. We were watching the news, and I was watching fires being set, the city burning, police officers being attacked, civilians being injured. I started obviously to think about my career and those instances lines. And I felt horrible for our police officers who were out there then and for New Yorkers in general. And I said to my girlfriend, I have the political background. I have the political law enforcement experience. I know this city as well as any. There's no reason why I can't lead this city and do a better job than the, at the time, current officials were doing. They certainly weren't doing their job. They sat back and allowed our city to be attacked and did nothing. And I just couldn't take it. And I said, hey, I'm going to run for mayor. She kind of gave me a little sideways look like I was crazy. And the next day I told my parents, and they kind of looked at me the other way and said, yeah, you. But I reached out to a friend of mine, Nancy Rhodes, in Brooklyn politics, and we sat down We had a good conversation, and she said, "Yeah, let's do it." And we started a grassroots campaign. No money, with really no name recognition politically in New York. My name being recognized because of my Uncle Joe. Um, and we put forward a hard fought campaign. I can sit here and tell you that we worked harder than any candidate. And we got our message was about saving New York City and turning New York City. I did lose, but I was proud of everything we did, and I'm proud of the campaign we ran.
And how did your family react? The girls and all three of them, and Kathy, you shared with how she felt, that she thought you were a little crazy at first, but that's okay. A lot of good things come out of crazy. But Cynthia, and how did she deal with it, having been in law enforcement, or is in law enforcement?
Cynthia is in law enforcement, third generation. She was all for it. She was very supportive. She was happy about it. She was excited about it. Kathy was on board after that look of insanity, and they were excited. They did a lot with me. They came to a lot of campaign events. They came to a lot of neighborhood events where we set up fundraisers and people, and they handed out brochures and literature for me. It was like a family affair, and everyone was included, and everybody really we had a good time. It was a learning experience.
That's awesome. And so we need to take a commercial break here real quick, and we'll be right back on here with Bill Pepitone.
The 2015 All-Star Game features the four greatest living baseball players: Hank Aaron, Johnny Bench, Sandy Koufax, and Willie Mays, who are all absolutely amazing players in their own right. But I'm in the room sitting next to my grandfather, Yogi Berra. And I'm thinking, wait a second. He's got more MVPs than any of these guys. He's won more World Series rings than all four of them combined. And I look at him and I said, "Are you dead?" And he said, "Not yet."
One of the greatest World Series resumes of any player ever.
Hey, he got it done. He was a winner because he had all the rings to prove it.
He's a figure that was larger than life.
There's no Jackie without the acceptance of Yogi Berra.
When Yogi comes to the team, they say he doesn't look like a Yankee.
He wasn't 6'3" with blonde hair. Everything about him was kind of funny.
He was a character. He was made fun of in the New York press.
But that sort of became who Yogi Berra was, this funny little guy.
That's right.
Yogi Berra. I don't think Yogi liked it too much.
The Yogi-isms. Let's talk about the Yogi-isms.
He said nobody goes to that restaurant anymore. It's too crowded.
When you get to a fork in the road, take it. What?
And it ain't over till it's over.
It makes a lot of sense.
That personality of his actually served to take away from his legacy as a baseball player.
It always felt wrong. It's not fair to him.
He's just a gentle, kind soul.
He was loved by so many people in this country.
Total respect for Yogi. A guy that everybody loved, not because he was cute and funny, it's because he was good and he was real.
He was the most overlooked superstar in the history of baseball.
My phone won't even work, so maybe it's on my end, fucking the whole thing up.
This is the Chapters Network. We apologize. We're having
technical difficulties at this point. So
worth the price of admission. We're working out all the kinks here, but there are only a few moments left in the show. And what they were talking about Bill Pepitone, about his career, and Jill is also mentioning of his brother's passing. And we're so thankful that we have somebody on the line.
We got
right
Bill
now.
so far.
Okay, Bill, you there, sir?
Yes, I am. How are you?
Good, Bill. This is Steve Vaccaro. I'm the person in charge of the network. We're having some technical difficulties, and we're going to try to get Jill to call in. But it's fascinating discussion that you're having with Jill. But for those Yankee fans out there, talk about your brother.
He's actually my uncle.
Your uncle. I'm sorry, sir.
No, that's okay. Joe is my uncle. He's my dad's brother. Everything you hear about my Uncle Joe, most of it was true, the good and the bad. He was a character. He loved life. He loved the Yankees. And he just loved being Joe Pepitone. And it's a huge loss for our family. It's a huge loss for so many of his fans that have reached out over the past few days. I can't tell you how many people have reached out to myself and my family with their condolences and their prayers. And you don't realize how many people's lives he affected. It was so long ago, but he was one in a million, no doubt.
No doubt. We just saw a commercial. I heard a commercial on the radio here. It ain't over. Yogi Berra's legacy and his documentary that came out. Lindsay Berra. And I think, Jill, are you on now, Jill?
I am.
Okay, Jill. So we're talking about the legacy of Joe Pepitone. And Jill, take over.
Well, he had great hair. And my stepson sent me a picture the other day of somebody that had brought in his hairdryer, because I guess he was one of the first ball players to bring one into the stadium, and he signed it. And I believe we might have a picture up for that. He had an incredible voice. He loved to sing. During our old timers day at the old stadium, we would all end up at the end of our day going up to the Great Moments room next to Mr. Steinbrenner's office, and we would eat, drink, and sing the night away. And he could sing.
Yes, he could.
And Bill, what did your family think about the book that he wrote, Joe, You Could Have Made Us Proud?
Well, it was a little bit of a mixed reaction from what I've been told over the years. I know they weren't happy about a lot that was in the book, but on the flip side, I think they felt that for Joe, it was an opportunity to exercise a lot of demons by writing that book and getting a lot of his feelings out, especially about his childhood and growing up and with his dad, his relationship with his dad, my grandfather. So there was two sides to the coin. There was a lot of things in there I think the family felt embarrassed about that Joe admitted. But again, at the same time, it was sort of an exorcism for him. And I think they were happy about that.
And so if Joe hadn't have been so eccentric, how do you think his career might have played out, with no pun intended?
I think Joe, if he would have applied himself, and this is from what I've heard from that stories that have been passed down, that Joe DiMaggio thought of him, and so many great Yankees thought of him. They felt he was a future Hall of Famer. He had everything. He was a great defensive player.
Very talented. Yes.
He was very talented. He could do it all. He could run. He could hit with power. He was a great defensive player. And he had everything. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to reach those goals. But Joe was Joe, and he enjoyed life and enjoyed being a Yankee.
There we go. Well, Bill, I thank you so much for sharing part of yourself, your family. I wish we had more time, and I hope that you will come back and talk to me again. And I hope that all of your endeavors are wonderful.
WTAN. ZHR, Zephyr Hills.
FM 104.3.
Listen.
You're listening to the Tan Talk